All right, welcome back to a special edition of MHU Football Interviews. Today we have an alumni member with us, David Cassell. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, man. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah,
Glad to hear
awesome
that you're doing this.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. All right, so just first of all, just give us where you're from, when you played here, and what you do now.
So we live in outside of Charlotte now in Fort Mill, South Carolina. I played here from 97 to 2001. And when I signed here, I was actually living, and my family's from over in the Johnson City area, so it wasn't too far from the house at the time. And then to your last question about what do I do now, I work for Intuitive Surgical. They're the Da Vinci surgical robot. And so I'm responsible for the Southeast and capital sales. And so I work with the large healthcare systems in the Southeast and work with their executive team, building out pro formas and business plans, and then actually selling them the Da Vinci robot.
Okay, we're definitely going to dive into how you got into that later, because that sounds super interesting.
Yeah.
First, let's take it back. Growing up playing football, was ever playing in college a goal of yours, or was it something that you kind of realized was a possibility as you got older?
Yeah, man, I think it's like every kid. You know, I grew up in a sports kind of dominated family. My dad played in college. He played basketball, Georgia Tech. My stepdad played football at University of Tennessee. And so from an early age, sports was just, part of life, And so I just remember, being 10 or 11 out in the driveway shooting shots, and every shot I would take, I'm like, okay, if I make this one, I'm playing professional basketball. If I make this one, I'm playing professional baseball, And so it wasn't just if, it was just what was I wanting to play or could play or have the opportunity to play. And so it was always just like, how can I play some sport in college and keep my career going?
That's an awesome mentality to have, too. It's like you get to play a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
So you came here as a wide receiver, correct?
Yeah.
You get hurt your freshman year?
I do, yeah.
And then you convert over to a tight end.
Yeah.
Was that something you saw happening or something you'd ever considered would happen, or just happened on the fly and you adjusted?
No, I mean, so coming out of high school, I played over at Science Hill, which is a big 5A school. I had quite a few Division I offers coming out. They all wanted me to play. Georgia Tech wanted me to play safety. Auburn wanted me to play outside linebacker. I loved offense. I loved catching the ball. And so I'd originally committed to Coach Torbush over at North Carolina and was going to go over there and play. He was going to give me a chance to play wide receiver, and if it didn't work out, then I was going to end up on the defensive side of the ball. And so I just kept trying to keep as far away of defense as I could. It came down to the end, and they didn't have a scholarship left. They had lost a scholarship, and so I was a little short man on the stick and lost that. And it was late in the year, so it was already like in the summer after my senior year where I thought I was good. I was going to UNC, and then there was a connection to Mars Hill, to your dad and Coach Van Arsdale, and so they had reached out and connected me with them, and so I came over here for a visit, and told them, I said, look, man, I just want to play wide receiver. If you'll give me a shot to play at this point, I just want to keep playing anywhere, and in the back of my mind, I think I was like every other kid that signs at Division II or a smaller school is like, man, I'm going to come here for a cup of coffee, and then I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else. And so I came here. My freshman year was playing wide receiver. I think in camp I hurt my thumb, ended up having to have surgery on it, and so I was redshirted my freshman year. So over that year, I had time to get on a regular weight program, eat regular meals, and so I think when I came here I was like 6'4", 190, and so after the end of my freshman year and going through a spring, I think I was already at like 230.
Oh my gosh!
So I don't think there was any choice of me having to like. Do I have a choice to transition from wide receiver to tight end? It was either like, if you want to play, like this is really about the only position you're going to be able to play.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy too. Because back then it was like a very prototypical old school tight end position for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Whereas now you'd be like the hybrid tight end,
right?
So now you're just 20 years too early.
That's right. Well, so even coming out, so the tight end I was backing up, well, not backing up, but like had played the year before me, my freshman year, was Mike Barley. And he was like basically great tight end here, but he was basically an extension of the offensive line. He was a big tackle. He was like 6'5", 6'4", 290.
Oh, wow.
And was a great player, but he was that prototypical tight end back then, was your blocking tight end, and then you would bring in another wide receiver and he would go out when you were in a passing situation. And so, it was a little early, but then during my tenure here, the spread offense was introduced. I played a lot of slot, and so I think I led the team in receptions all 4 years here. But it was because they went to a high, kind of pro style West Coast offense where there was using the tight end in the slot.
Yeah, interestingly enough, having been here and watched it at a young age, you and Rod DeWalt are the two that's when I started remembering receivers' names. Because before that, it was like we ran the ball every play. Everybody ran the ball every play.
Yep.
Carson Newman was still in a split back veer.
That's right.
I mean, until like only a few years ago.
Yep.
But like everybody just ran the ball, and then all of a sudden it was like now I know tight end and receiver names.
That's right.
So thank you.
Yeah,
for,
of course,
for
of course.
All right, so we're already looking back. What is the most memorable moment you have playing here?
Man, there's so many, and I think it's, I think it kind of it gets cliche because you hear every athlete say, the locker room or the time with the guys. But I think one of the moments that just stands out, and I'm here on a visit with my son and two of his buddies that play football now over in Charlotte. But, we were talking on the way over here, and it's one of those things where I remember your dad calls us all in summer camp. We're ending summer camp. We're about to start the season. School's about to start. And he calls us all into, I think it was Belk Auditorium or whatever's over there. And we're all filling the auditorium. And he walks down there and just says, like, look to your right, look to your left. And he's like, this time flies, And he's like, before you know it, you're going to be a senior here or you're going to be coming back to visit. And at 18, I'm like, dude, man, 4 years, 4 more years, like that's a lifetime. And so now you look at it, and I'm 42, and looking back on it, and you're like, man, that it really does fly. And so it's just one of those things that it really just sticks out to me because you just got to one, take advantage of every situation, but also slow down to just enjoy every moment.
Yeah. So speaking, like, you first get here, you're meeting these guys. You go to that meeting, and you're meeting all these guys. Is there somebody that sticks out in your head that you remember spending a lot of that time with? And what was that like in college?
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, late 90s?
Yeah, I think, one of the values in my whole purpose of being here today is I want to show Max, my son, and his friends who, have aspirations to play in college also, that there's real value in smaller schools. And so, like, everyone always says they want to go play at UNC or they want to go play at South Carolina, and not everyone's fortunate enough to have that opportunity. But just because you don't, and if you don't, it's okay, and that there's real value, and you could really you can thrive in a situation at a smaller school that if you get in the right situation. And, I loved my time here. And so, I think one of those reasons is because there wasn't just one person that I spent a ton of time with. When you're here on campus, I mean, you went to school here, and I mean, you're not forced, but there's nothing else really going on to where you're in class with classmates that aren't teammates, but, you're studying, in the library, you're spending time in the dorm with, you're, walking around campus in the cafeteria with. And so it really becomes a family, and so you have your football family, but then you also have your student family here. And it's small enough that everyone knows everybody, and there's a real value in that. And so, of course, the football teammates were brothers, and I could probably name 5 of them I'm still stay in close contact with and stay in touch with that, meant the most to me while I was here. But I think just the duration of my time here and the relationships I made that I was able to make with professors and with students and, faculty, just meant the world.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up other students that you're in classes with, because it is funny. You end up in your major, and all of a sudden you start seeing the same people in every class.
That's right.
And forced is, it's like a bad word, but I can't think of a better word. You're forced to interact with these people, and then you're all doing your senior seminar together or internship together or whatever.
Right.
And all of a sudden you're like, man, I actually really know this person, and I've never introduced myself to this person.
That's right.
We're in class together.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Just life happenstance puts you in the same class, and y'all become close, you know, and you know more about that person than you did about your own family.
Yeah, it's really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so when you were actually playing, do you have any? We always ask the players this. Do you have like an oh crap moment that you're in college and things are different? So you're on the field, maybe a guy's bigger or faster than you're used to. Did you have like an awakening moment?
Yeah, I think, man. So I think probably every freshman goes through it, and you always hear like the maturation of football going from high school to college and to the next level is always the speed, and I think you rarely talk about. People say like the size, and there's a huge difference between an 18-year-old freshman and a 21-year-old fifth senior or just a 21-year-old senior. And so, Coach Van Arsdale was here, and he was the offensive line coach. And at the time, I still feel like they're probably one of the largest, biggest from, average size offensive linemen that Mars Hill's probably ever had. But they had Udi, they had Greg Malikian, they had some of those guys here that were all probably, in my mind, 6'3", 6'4", 280, 290, and we're doing inside drill, and so you're thinking, man, like every high school kid, you dominated at that level, so you're going to come here and dominate, and you get thrown in on one-on-ones with some of these guys, and it's a oh crap moment really really quick, and so.
One of my favorite thing about all these interviews is that it's always one of the most common things people bring up is the offensive line. They're like, oh man, these guys are way big, because guys that played on defense or were helping block on offense,
right?
And they're always like, man, these guys are way bigger than high school. It's funny that that's the commonality.
It is, and I think it's because just the sheer size is so different. You might come across one guy in high school that's big, for a high school senior, but you see 5 grown men sitting across from you that are 22, 23, 21, whatever it is, and they're all 6'4", 290. I mean, that's big.
Yeah, it definitely is big. All right, so you mentioned your son playing now, and we've already talked about some of the differences in the game from when you were playing. What's the biggest difference in the game with how it's played now? And it could be, outside of the actual game, but like how kids are brought up now playing the game. What's the biggest difference you see?
2 aspects. I think if you talk about, position-specific, receivers are taught totally different now than when I played, and I had some of the best coaches in the in the world, I think. From here, I was All-American. I went on and had some opportunities in NFL camps and had some of those elite coaches working with you on just getting off the ball and releases and your first steps and everything. And it was all about just angles, leverage, and gaining ground when you're talking about receiver specific. You never want to take a false step. You know where you're going, and so you want that first step to beat them off the ball to now gain leverage to get off the ball to where they can't hold you from your stem and on your route. So I'd always worked with my son. He plays wide receiver. So then, he's showing me all these YouTube videos. Look at this guy. I'm like, that's wrong. And so I get him out there with a guy over in Charlotte who played at Michigan State and who was with the Panthers for a long time. And now he is just coach wide receivers. And so I got him out there, and within the first 10 minutes, I realized real quick the game has changed, the position has changed. They're teaching false steps, they're teaching slide steps, they're teaching giving ground and then get upfield, and so I think just the position, but I think that's just a maturation of the game because it's so pass dominant now. When I played, like you said, it was run heavy. And you had to dominate on the run and establish the run, and then you would throw the ball. Now it's just mostly a quarterback and receiver league.
Yeah, throw on first down.
That's right.
It shows statistically it's better.
Right.
Now, that's not how it always
works
out.
That's right. And I think another piece that's changed is that wasn't around when I was around, and has a huge value, especially for these skill guys, is 7-on-7. Max and his buddy. 7-on-7 over in Charlotte is so competitive. You got teams that every single guy on there has already signed Division I. A majority of them have signed Division I schools off their 7-on-7 team. They go to these huge elite tournaments, and colleges are there because they can see such a vast majority of guys in the Southeast playing in these tournaments that they don't have to go to games anymore and watch high school film. They can size them up right there without pads, watch them out there run, and they're giving offers there. And so 7-on-7, I think, is just a part of the game that wasn't around, but I think it has a place to stay. It'll be interesting to see with the more they talk about CTE and concussions. And these guys are wearing foam helmets. There's not much contact. You just wonder how much more entrenched does something like this get compared to 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's really interesting to watch. You talked about the change in how routes are ran and what the steps and stuff receivers have to do. It's also interesting to watch the change in being a DB because I feel like it's much harder than it used to be as far as what you can and can't get away with, right? They can touch less now,
right.
But also have to deal with more and way more complicated schemes. Now, the counter is that they have way more disguised defensive options. Yeah. It's very hard to tell now. Me and Dad will break down film, and you'll be like, I can't tell if they're in quarters or man until the play starts. And you're
right.
like, oh, they're actually in cover 3. Like,
right,
you don't even know until,
that guy ran inside us. We came over the top, and now they're cover 3.
But in 7-on-7, the interesting part is these receivers, the skill guys are so good. I've talked with multiple people about it now, that the walk-ons at a D2 school would be starting receivers at 1AA schools 15 years ago.
Yeah.
They're just so much more skilled than they used to be. But the corner position is almost in this weird position where you watch these kids and they're always jamming at the line because they don't really have another option.
Right.
It's really interesting to watch. That's why it's such an art to watch a really good corner.
I agree, and that's why they're so sought after.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's a couple guys that Max plays with that you could tell physically they're really gifted, but they've worked on their craft so long. It's one of those things. I don't think it's a position that kids grow up saying, "I want to be a corner." They always joke that corners are receivers that can't catch. And so it's like they grew up playing receiver, and then they just get transitioned at some point to corner, and they're just gifted and athletic enough to play the position. The few that have grown up working on their craft and their footwork and their release, and like you said, your jam and then opening up, those are the ones that are so sought after, and you can tell the ones that have really worked at it, but colleges are all over them, and it's because it's a skill set that I think that most kids don't develop. Yeah,
it's definitely a position that you see. You can go watch a D3 game and you can pick out, there's a lot of really good players, but the corners are always like, they're already all gone. So It's a guy that had to switch over when he got to college because they're already all D1 or 1AA or D2. There's nobody left.
That's right.
It's a great point.
Yeah.
So one of the things you commented on when you first came in was just the facilities and how much they changed. And this is probably my favorite part of this interview is, give me what the facilities were like in comparison when you were here to now.
Yeah,
because it's awesome.
Man, I love my time here. I wouldn't change anything for the world. But if you just stack ranked Mars Hill to the rest of the South Atlantic Conference from a facility standpoint, I would say it was the bottom one or two. The field house was the gym in the bottom basement.
Yep.
The locker room was, I think, some bathroom that had been, they just shoved some lockers in. There was a locker, I don't even know if it had ventilation because it smelled that typical locker room smell.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
But it had showers in the back. That I was joking with your dad today when we were walking through the new facilities here, our newer facilities here. But the showers in the back, you always took a shower in the dark because I don't think the electricity ever even worked in the locker room when I was here. And so it's come a long way. And then even just from the campus, I mean, the science building wasn't here. Myers dorm was like one of the only dorms up there. Myers and the one on the backside, Gibson or something, were the only two dorms up on that. The other two were condemned.
Right, yeah.
They were condemned and shut down, so that you couldn't even, they weren't even functional. And Myers didn't have air conditioning. I don't know if it does now, but it didn't have air conditioning. It was community showers. So I think, you just look at the new dorms here, it's just difference of night and day.
Yeah, I think my favorite, if you ever can pull up a picture, my favorite is the press box.
Yeah.
Compared to the press box now.
The siding with half the siding missing.
Yeah, it was like a trailer was put on, and now it looks awesome. It looks phenomenal.
Yeah,
and like you said, it's funny if you look at pictures of where the field house is now. There was just like houses over here,
right,
and like a weird ditch.
Yeah.
And then where you guys practiced next to the tennis courts was just like
mud. It was a mud hole, and I think this was like the tennis office, but it was a old house that the campus had bought.
Yeah,
right.
It was an old house.
Yeah.
And then when you guys moved over to the practice facilities they have now, two of the old fields they still use sometimes, they had the barn out there. And,
right.
I mean, it was just, it's great stuff you would never think about again. And now you've got a fully turfed facility.
Right.
The stands look amazing.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a whole new field house.
bricked press box.
A bricked press box, whole new field. It's really crazy. It's an awesome experience now. So
yeah.
It's just fun to hear somebody talk about what they used to have. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things that it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what was here because my time was so valuable. And I tell my son and them on the way over here that what really made this place was your dad and the coaches that are still here. And so it wouldn't matter what the facilities were. I would still love bringing them back, but just because of what this place meant to me. But because the facilities are so nice now, it's like I'm excited to bring them back and show them what a small school has to offer.
It'd be really hard to bring them back now if the facilities were still the same.
It would. Yeah, it would. All I could talk about would be how great the coaches were.
They're really good. Man. I know that you can't shower after games.
Right.
But yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. So this is a fun question. I haven't had an alumni on here, so it's awesome to be able to ask this. Best player you played with while you were here? And you could give me both sides of the ball if you want.
Well, I mean, I think
besides yourself, who was the best player?
Yeah, no, man. I think I'm biased because it was he's one of my best friends, but I mean his name's all out there. But Khalid Abdullah was him and I played together. We were both first team All-Americans for 2 years while we were here. We had a healthy rivalry. He was a linebacker, I was a tight end, so we went one-on-one every day in practice. And so it just it was one of those things, iron sharpens iron. And so we were just best friends off the field, but so competitive on the field. And so he was a freak. I think our junior year, I think he led the country in pick sixes for 100 yards. I think he had like 3.
Yeah, he had a 109-yard return. Those on ESPN.
Yeah, and so I think he had 2 or 3 of those that year.
Yeah.
And so just a freak. 6'3", 215, 220, and could probably run a legit 4.4.
Yeah, exactly, legit 4.4. Yeah, it's funny, the interception we were just talking about. If you watch it closely, you can see where he's trying to pitch the ball to another player.
He is. I think he's looking for George.
Yeah, and
he's like, "Where's
waving
George?"
him off, like, I don't want that. And he just continues running.
Yep.
But he's like about to run into somebody, and he's like trying to pitch it. It's a pretty awesome clip.
Yeah.
That's an awesome answer because obviously played in the NFL with the Bengals before injuries, but phenomenal.
And we're still good friends now and talk quite a bit.
Do you have anybody on the offensive end that sticks out in your mind? Because it's funny, because I was like, he's going to say Khalid.
Yeah.
But what if he said somebody on the offensive end just to,
Yeah, I think it's just because of what I went up against every day in practice. But, I have a ton of mutual respect from a lot of my offensive guys. And so, we had some great linemen here while I was here. And so I feel like, by naming somebody, I'm gonna leave out others.
Right.
But I will say, because their names out there as well, your dad and I were talking, we were talking to Max and a buddy of mine that's here with me, the running backs. And I feel like the duo that we had with Terrence Stokes and McFadden was probably, and still to this day, probably the best duo we've ever had here, but maybe even in the conference. Those 2 guys, Terrence, I think, had won Freshman of the Year over at Western Carolina the year before. McFadden had, I think, committed and signed to South Carolina, but on the sliding scale couldn't get in, and so he came here. And so you had two of these guys in the backfield together. McFadden took a step back and played fullback while Terrence played his junior and senior year, I think, and then McFadden stepped up and was, the bell cow, for the other 2 or 3 years. And those guys were 2 legit, like just D1 workhorses, and both were so unselfish and, in the huddle. And they, I remember a number of conversations where they would talk about in the huddle during the game who already had enough carries to where they wanted the other guy to switch to where one would block for the other guy to get the ball, you know, and it's just like, it just set the culture of the team of just selflessness. But you couldn't find 2 better guys off the field, but just unbelievable talented running backs.
It's funny, we have a debate about that all the time about which one was better, because it's always like, and it's not that either one was really better than the other, but it's just such a fun discussion. And for years it was just like, oh man, if we just had one of those guys, because they were just so talented. Yeah. Now we ended up having a Harlan Hill Trophy winner in Jonas Randolph, who was, I think he gets the win because the award, the stats, but those 3 guys all in my memory just are, they're ingrained in my memory because they were that good. And I was 7 when Travis and Terrence were playing. So to them, I could still see number 5 running with the ball. You know what I mean? It's which is crazy.
Well, and like I said, man, I'm biased because they were here when I was here, and nothing against Randolph, but Randolph didn't split the ball or split the carries.
No, he did not. He had it 40 times a game.
Right, that's right. and so, but either one of those, all 3 of those are interchangeable. And so, you can't take any of them away. And then if you want to look at wide receiver. I played here with Shorty, who was a great personality.
I still see Shorty every once in a while in Asheville.
So just his personality alone, made him just a great teammate. And then of course I played with Rod, and Rod was a talent. 6'3", probably 170, 180, could fly and just go up and get the ball. So we had some great players here.
Rod Dewalt's claim to fame in my brain, obviously he had a ton of good games, but there was a corner from Tusculum that got drafted pretty high.
Yeah.
And he scored like 4 touchdowns on him in one game. It was every time he got deep threat, every single time. That's how talented he was at the deep ball. It was unbelievable.
I agree. And they knew it was coming. And, and they would put a safety over the top, and, when it was crunch time and they knew they had to have a deep ball and they were going to try to go to Rod, he could still go up and get it. Rod and I met up and were on the sideline for the Newberry game this year. For the conference championship. And Max was with me, and my other son, who's Jack. Jack was born and around when I played here, and so he's in his 3rd year of med school now at University of South Carolina.
That's
and
awesome.
So he has fond memories of Mars Hill. It's funny. He, as much as he loves South Carolina, he still wears like Mars Hill shorts like to the games, and it's just funny. It has an affinity. He has an affinity towards Mars Hill as well. But Rod and I were talking about you're talking about memories of him, and we played my senior year. We played at PC for their
I
homecoming.
knew that's what you were going to say.
And they were number 3 or 4 in the country, and I think we were number 7 or 8, something like that. And we ended up beating them, but it was on a catch from Rod down the sideline. But we were in the huddle, and they came back in, and your dad had called a play that was actually going to me for a first down, and we changed it in the huddle. And I looked at Rod and said, "Rod, you better go get this dang ball, because neither one of us has a job if this doesn't work out." And so I think Carlos or Chris, I don't remember who was in the huddle. Anyway, just let it fly, and Rod went up, got it, caught it, and scored, and we beat them.
That's unbelievable. That's such a cool memory to have.
Yeah,
to be
is.
able to talk about.
Yep.
All right. So post-college, you're getting out of college. How did you decide what you were going to do next, and what led you to your current career?
Man, it's been there hasn't been a straight trajectory. Like so I knew I've always been a hard worker, not afraid of working, and so I didn't really know what I wanted to do once football ended. And so it took me some time, but I got into I did an internship when I finished here in football. I did an internship with Merrill Lynch, thinking I had banking and finance from here. So I thought I wanted to go in to be some financial planner, stockbroker, something. Did that for like 6 months as an internship, and knew like that was the last thing I wanted to do, was sit in a cubicle and just dial for dollars all day, trying to get people to start investing in you. So I took a job with a startup medical device company down in Savannah, Georgia. Cut my teeth there. After a couple years, about a year and a half, left there. Bought it. Man, it's all over the place. Bought a chain of dry cleaners. Like I just felt like, okay, look, I understand business. Like I could build something, And so I knew a buddy that had some dry cleaners, and so I bought a chain of dry cleaners over in Chattanooga. Built that up and sold them off. So then I liked Chattanooga and Atlanta, so I stayed there for a while and flipped houses, like just grinding, and kind of figured that out. Started importing some stuff in from China, sinks and granite countertops.
Oh, wow.
Then my wife now, who is our oldest son Jack's mom, we weren't married at the time. Yeah, we weren't married at the time. And so, but we had always stayed really, really close. We got married. Jack was like 10, so I felt like it was the responsible thing to do, which was, get a corporate job. And so I went into the corporate America and took a job in pharmaceuticals. It was still during its heyday. And so you took a job with Novartis, which got me into that medical field-ish, but it was selling pharmaceuticals. Knew that if I wanted to progress, I needed to go back to school, so I got Novartis to pay for my MBA. So I went back to school and got my MBA in healthcare administration. Once I did that, it opened me up to a couple other positions, so I went to go work for Allergan, which is Botox. Worked my way up the corporate ladder there, and then from there, Intuitive Surgical, which is the Da Vinci robot. We're out of Silicon Valley. It's the only surgical robot right now, or for the last 20 years. Had a position, so I transitioned over to Intuitive 5 years ago, and so now I'm on the capital side, and so like I said, I cover 3 or 4 states, working with executives in healthcare systems, and just really aligning on them on a strategy around Da Vinci, and then ultimately just selling and placing the Da Vinci robots, at hospitals across the Southeast.
That is a heck of a journey.
It is, man. That's why I try to condense it as much as possible, and so how you get there, but it really is just about goals, experiences, and just trying to just work your way up and just kind of play that corporate jungle gym.
Let's take a quick break. When we get back, I'm going to dive a little bit more into that because that's super interesting.
Yeah.
All right, and we are back. So you took a lot of steps to get where you're at. I think that's a great lesson to a lot of people that, your first step might not be the final one, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any future plans, either within your career or outside of the career, that you're trying to accomplish now?
Yeah, I think I'm always looking to grow, and what does that look like? And so, there's opportunity within corporate America, within Intuitive, which is, like I said, a great company, to where you could continue to grow within that. But I think you also always want to continue to grow outside, and what does that look like to where you could secure financially for your family down the road, and so as great of a living that corporate America could provide, you're always ultimately working for somebody, and so I always have aspirations to keep growing outside of corporate America, whatever that looks like, investment properties, businesses that I can invest in or start. And so, I think I'm always looking for that next, kind of horizon of what that looks like.
That's a great mentality to have.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's no different than you. I mean, you bought land. You have 15 acres. I mean,
true.
You were doing that to secure your future. You knew it was going to be a good investment that was going to grow. Regardless if it's somewhere where you build a house or not. That you have a tangible asset that's only going to appreciate.
Yeah, it's fun to see the mentality of people as they get further along in different careers and how that changes. It's really fun to see the mentality you're at right now because you've accomplished so much, but it's always like stay hungry, get to the next thing, and keep going.
Well, I think you got to be, I always try to be a great example for my kids. I just remember my dad was really, really successful in corporate America, and I always just took away a lot of things. Like I always saw him up. It didn't matter what time I woke up in the morning. He was already up and already had a Bible study, and it had already worked out. And I'm like, what? It's 6 a.m. And he's like, I was up at 3:30. I'm like, dude, I'm not. I can't set my alarm and get up. And so, but I just thought how much that meant to me. And just him always, putting the family first, always making sure that everyone was taken care of, always making sure that they were going to be provided for, and so I think, I keep that in the back of my mind of trying to set that example for my kids too, and so I want them to get that work ethic instilled in them, and to where it's like nothing's given to you or nothing's promised, but at the same time you can go earn it.
Yeah, exactly. So just kind of expounding upon that, What's a piece of advice, the best piece of advice you can give to the guys that are playing here now? Because you were once in their position.
Yeah.
What's the best piece of advice you can give them? Or pieces of advice?
Yeah, man, I think it's, I'm in a position to where, I've fired, I look for, and you start looking for, what are, certain, characteristics that people, instill that are going to allow them to be successful. And, you always hear kind of like another cliche to where, companies always look for college athletes, and I was like, do they or do they not, and why would they? But, I think one thing that separates, and the reason they do is because of, some of that balanced school, sports, time management, work ethic, setting an alarm at 5:30 in the morning when you'd been in the library till, 12 a.m. studying. There's a lot of aspects that get instilled in them over those 5 years that kids that just went to college didn't get. And granted, you don't have to be an athlete to be successful, but it instills some behaviors and work ethic that others don't typically get during their college process. And so, you start looking at what other behaviors allow people to be successful. And I'm always like looking, what could you do to be better? And man, it's not real complicated. It's the two behaviors I talk to my kids about is preparation and effort, and it doesn't matter what you do, if it's sports, if it's school, if it's, a job, if you prepare the way you should, and then you give 100% effort as you're doing it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be successful and the rest is going to take care of itself, and so like we never talk about with my kids, I never talk about end results of the game. It's like, if you're not satisfied with the end result, let's take it back and talk about, did you give all the effort you could during the game? If so, then let's talk about the preparation, because there was somewhere in the process that was broken down, And so like when you talk about, any advice for these guys is, man, just take what you've learned here in college, not even from a academic standpoint, just the behaviors that it's taken to be successful and get that degree, waking up every day, showing up every day. I think that's 9 times out of 10 of it. When you look at corporate America, there's so many people that if you just show up every day and do what you say you're going to do, you're going to be successful, And so don't overthink it. Just prepare like you should and give 100% effort in regardless of what you're going into in whatever field, and you're going to be successful.
It's super interesting you say all that, because I was actually having a conversation with someone the other day about how just going to college, even if you don't graduate, or going to work at a business you might not stay at, even if you don't stay there forever, those behaviors that you create while you're there can carry on and make you successful. So there's plenty of players that have come here, they've played 3 or 4 years, they didn't get their degree, but their lives were a lot more successful just based on having stuck with something for 4 years or
That's
3
right.
years, where they learned habits that helped them in the future.
Absolutely, man. I think just the work ethic, like I said, the will to win, the ability to compete, want to compete, time management. Those are all aspects that get instilled in you when you play college sports. And so if you can get a taste of that, understand the value of it, and even if you don't finish and you're not successful, and you just retrospectively look back at like where did it go wrong, it's probably one of those things that maybe you just self-realize what you need to do going forward. But either way, it's the experience that allowed you to be successful or carry on to be successful.
That's an unbelievable way to put it.
Yeah.
Is there any last thoughts or anything before you go? It's awesome to have you back here. I feel like I haven't seen you in.
I know, since you were small. I think
I
think I checked in probably 10 years after I had left, and you were around still. So I think you were playing soccer, and you were like 16 or 17. In high school is the last time we saw each other. So it was good to reconnect.
Yeah.
Like I always consider everyone here, we're always family regardless.
Let me get because you've already done it a couple times throughout the conversation. Let me get your Mars Hill pitch for prospective students.
Yeah. So man, I think, I've had a lot of time to reflect over the last, couple months. Like I said, a couple times I'm here for my son. They're 15 and his buddies are 15, 16. Everyone these days starts getting soft offers from Division I schools early on, and none of them are committable. And so, I feel like it gets in their mind that they've already made it because they've had a couple of Division I schools offer them scholarships at 15 years old, and so what I'm telling them is, look, man, just, from a goal standpoint, I think it's a great lofty goal, but just know that if you're not able to accomplish that and actually get to Division I, there's other opportunities out there for you that are going to afford you great opportunities going forward in life, Division II or, even NAIA or whatever it is. Your goal needs to be, if you can use sports to get into a school, to get an education, that's what you need to do, And so I wanted them, because every time I hear them have a conversation, it's always about a UNC, a Duke, or a Wake, or, whatever, UNC Charlotte, because we live in Charlotte. And so I wanted them to be able to start seeing and conceptualizing the value that smaller schools could have, and that it's not a negative if you go to a smaller school, so I wanted them to start seeing the value that they could find here, and one of the main values is the relationships that you have here. It's rare that your dad is still a coach here, 20 years later. Fife's still here as a D-line coach, Barnett's still here as the defensive coordinator, and Surratt's still here. You don't find that at a small school.
Lefton came back.
Right, Lefton came back, and so it's the relationships that draw me back here, but it's still my experience that was here. And so my pitch about Mars Hill or any small school though is the opportunity that it affords you to keep your career going, academically and from an athletic standpoint. And so, if you don't have the opportunity and to accomplish your goals, if it truly is a Division I school, that you could still accomplish every single one of those goals that you have in life by going to a smaller school. And there's nothing wrong with it. And actually, you could thrive in an environment better in a smaller situation because there's so much more accountability here, because you have breakfast check, you have teachers that know who you are and why weren't you in class.
Yeah, they do.
They genuinely care about you. If you're struggling in a subject, that they will take time out of their time. I don't even know if Granger Caudle's still around here, but he met me a couple times on campus after hours, like outside his office hours, just to make sure I had finite math down before an exam, And so it's that personal touch that you're not going to get at a larger school. And so when you start looking at really what your goal is in college, which is to graduate with a degree and have a great experience, Mars Hill can do that just as good, if not better, than UNC or a Duke.
Yeah, I'm really glad you phrased it that way, especially about the professors, because there was multiple times that I knew other athletes that would, if you just go to a professor and just explain the situation here, 9 times out of 10, they're not just going to give you an extension on paper. They're going to show you how to do what you need to do to be successful, which is, I can't say I would have ever gotten at a larger school. No,
man, you're a number, and to your point, man, they give you the resources that you need to be successful. It's up to you to capitalize that on or not. And so the only reason you wouldn't be successful here is because you just don't want to try.
Well, it's been awesome having you.
Yeah, of course,
Thank you so much for doing this with us.
Yeah,
we look forward.
Thank you for putting this together. I'm glad. I think it's a great resource for Mars Hill and getting content out there. I feel like it's probably something that your dad, who just walked in, has been missing.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad you're here and getting this done.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you again, man.
Of course, man. If we could stay in touch. Yep. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for watching this interview with the Mars Hill University football program. If you all enjoyed the content, make sure to like and subscribe for more.